What's your main motivation for seeking a seat on the LCSD1 Board of Trustees?
I have 12 little reasons called grandchildren, and they keep me so motivated. And every time I get discouraged, I just think about them.
Tell us a little bit about why did you decide that you wanted a seat on the board as opposed to just observing and following the process?
Well, I'd spent a lot of time talking to the board, emailing the board, actually the superintendent also, but I just felt like at times my emails, my 3 minutes, it just wasn't getting answered. It just seemed like it was just a stalemate. I wasn't getting anywhere. There was nothing being done. And so then I started searching through the board docs, through their board policies, through what our district policies were, thinking maybe I could help myself with this and not have to deal with them. And it's just been a slow, progressive process.
If you're elected, how would you make sure that you're considering the needs of all constituents?
Well, I'll tell you what I said to the GOP when I first started running. I had in my head, my set of reasons, and then I'm knocking on doors and I'm talking to parents. I had a mom that was in tears about her son that had been threatened, and we talked about the steps that she needed to go through with that, how she needed to talk to the teacher, and then she's carried to the vice principal, and then going through there, and she had messaged me and said, I know there's this resolution that the board did, and I sent that to her, and she talked to them again, and she was just in tears. So now I will tell you that some of the reasons that I started running for aren't the reasons I'm running for now, because the more I talk to people, the more I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was such a big issue. And if I'm going to be the voice for South Triad and for the district, I need to be concerned about what their issues are. I need to make sure that those policies that we have in place, we are actually doing. And as far as safety, I'll tell you, I don't think we are. And I've had numerous examples from parents, from a couple of students, and I've even talked to some teachers and a couple that got out after 10 plus years because of safety in the classroom, and they didn't feel like they could properly discipline a child without it coming back on them.
Let me follow up on that question because it's about how you consider the needs of all members of all constituents. You're running in Area 1, which is basically the South Triad.
Correct.
Why did you choose to run in Area 1 as opposed to the at-large seat, and how do you think that will inform your position and your approach to being on the school board if you're elected?
Cost was my very first issue. Just weighing that if I were to run at large, I could probably triple my budget, which I don't have that kind of money to just start up. And as far as campaigning in 3 different areas, although I feel like I've gotten good support from people that are out there willing to help me, and so that's great, but that was one. But I just felt like I read an article end of June in the Cap City News about ARP Elementary School. Jessica Rodriguez was interviewed, if you remember that. Yep, and that also is another rabbit hole that I'm going down. And so I contacted the district about that, Superintendent Crespo and Assistant Superintendent Fraley, about what could we do and why are we not taking care of our school buildings. And then I got an invitation to this community engagement meeting after the 4th of July at Meadowlark. And they had planned for about 200 people to be there, and there were only 12 of us, counting me, and then I brought a friend with me. And it's a beautiful school. Have you ever been in there? I love, especially the part where Jim Fraley says, and if there's ever an intruder in the building, we've got these large gates that come down and we can lock them in an area. That, the natural lighting, the fact that they're not sharing a cafeteria and they're not sharing a gymnasium, I'm like, this is cool. And then I found out that that's exactly how Coyote Ridge is going to be done. So then naturally I said, so what's the plan for the South Triad? And we have a plan, it's just getting the state on board. Again, that's another rabbit hole that I've gone down. So because I want to make sure that our schools that are overcrowded, that number one, we alleviate that sooner than later. I'm aware of the process and how long it's going to take to get that, even if we get funding in February or March from the state legislation. So I wanted to be on board with that now. And I've toured a couple of the schools. Andy Knapp has been really gracious. The Parent Involvement Committee at ARP, they were super. It's just as far as letting me take this on.
All right, next question. What do you think the relationship between the board and parents should look like?
I think, number one, we should be available either by text, phone call, email. I hate for the last resort, honestly, to be parents showing up at a board meeting and just unloading. And quite frankly, I've been that grandma because nobody would answer me. So, and I have to say, now that I've been doing this for over a year, they're way better at email. But I've had a couple that have picked up the phone and called me. I always include a phone number. I think that's important. And that's my main thing, is I want to make sure that they know I'm available to talk to. And if you feel like you need to have a sit down with me, call me and let's meet at Starbucks or Dasbog or the library, and let's talk about this. I know that as one board member, I can't act as the whole board or make decisions for them, but I can certainly talk to a parent, a grandparent, a community member even, and take that concern and say, hey, I've had some parents that I've talked to. Here's what they're saying, and go from there.
Thanks.
Sure.
What do you think the rules of engagement should be at school board meetings? There are obviously some rules that are already in
There
place.
are rules.
What do you think?
Okay, so from the time I started showing up and speaking, it's always been you had to call in ahead of time, and they like the 24 hours, and then you get put on the list. Now I know from parents that have been doing this for a few years, you used to go in, you could just raise your hand and they'd go front to back and let you have your 3 minutes. I like that because there have been a couple of times where I get there and something's said and I'm like, oh, I'd love to ask them about this, but I'm not on the list. So then I have to go home and shoot emails and hope that somebody emails me back.
So you'd like to go back to the
I would
registration
like to, well, so if there's a registration process, I would say just, if there's a clipboard or something, just put your name on the clipboard.
Okay.
And then they could even do that.
Night of the meeting.
Night of the meeting or
3
something.
minutes time limit?
I think 3 minutes is great. I don't know if you were at the masking ones, like when they voted to take the masks off. They had so many people speaking at that. And actually, I was the last one to get on the list. And Darlene, I love Darlene, she was really good to me that night. I said, I want to speak on the agenda. And she's like, there's not room on the agenda. But then somebody canceled and she let me in to speak at that point. Because I feel like I could have been there until midnight, if that were the case. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Do you think K-12 schools in Wyoming are adequately funded? And if not, how would you recommend the legislature address the issue?
That's a yes and a no. So let's talk about the facilities themselves first. I think that their system is a lose-lose for students, and here's why. You have an FCI score, actually brought that with me, that, and I'll show you if you want to take a peek at that, where ARP Elementary School is. I have a side note. They were 2. And then they had the roof leak, and for insurance reasons, they had to put a new roof on, and that's how far down they are. So, and I say BS. That's wrong in so many ways. We have schools, we had a set of parents that spoke during the school facilities committee meeting in the morning, and they were from Hobbs. And they took a picture of their child's thermometer in her classroom, and it was up in the 80s. But to do something about that, even if the school district bought fans, then that could possibly lower that score. So who in the end gets penalized? Students, educators, anybody that's in that building, and that's wrong. We have buildings like ARP Elementary School that their parent involvement committee put fans in every room. They have 2 fans. You get those plugged in, you get your iPad. They have this big box that charges all the iPads. You get that going. If you use your overhead whiteboard, the chances are for the power in that building to just totally be shut off, to be overloaded. then your kids are sent outside, they're in the grass, and how safe is that for a long period of time when you're supposed to be inside, technically windows shut and doors shut? So I have an issue with the way that the state has that policy. When I spoke at that meeting, I asked that they at least do the $50 million to get us started with our 5th and 6th grade school to alleviate some of the overcrowding in our district. But then as far as educators and that part, I think that I don't know enough, honestly, to make a comment on that. But here's what I know about our district. I think that there could be areas that we could go back, like checks over $500, and go through that and see what those checks are being written for, that we could come up with our own money to help with that problem. And at the last meeting, were you at the last school board meeting where they talked about the new pay scale? I really like that. But when you have contract workers, as in your paras, your custodians, your food service people, I know for food service people, you could go to Qdoba's and make more money than working at our school. So something needs to change. Paras could work at Target and make more money. So if we want to get qualified, good qualified people that are going to stick around, we need to make sure that we're paying them living wages. And I don't think that we are.
Part of that question, Susan, was how would you recommend the legislature address the issue? Do you have any suggestions for how the legislature create funding or get funding for the district?
Well, I think that they should write that bill to give us the $50 million to get started on that school. I know at the parent community engagement meeting back in July, they talked about 3 phases. And the first was the 5th and 6th grade school. The second and third were piggybacked together. It was Cole Elementary and ARP, the tear down and reconstruction. So if we could get allocation funding and get those started, that would help our district a lot. And we're the largest district in the state, and we continue to grow.
If you're elected as a board member, what would be your budget priorities for the district?
I want to make sure that our teachers in the classroom are adequately funded. And also that means that they're not out there buying their own school supplies and things for the classroom. Again, if we could go through the checks over $500 and find money that could be steered towards that, I'd like to see each of them get some sort of stipend for their classroom. Number 2 would be elementary school sports. Kids need to play, they need to get out, they need to be active, and they need to work cooperatively. And what a better environment than an after-school sport. And then 3rd would be a STEM class in every elementary school. When Governor Gordon put out the RIDE survey, I don't know if any of you have looked at the results of that. Yep, so STEM was high on that, and I think for really good reason.
How do you feel about increasing teacher compensation? If you agree salaries need to be increased, how would you find the funds to do that?
I think that HR is working on that now, and I think that they said that they were just through the first phase, so I'd like to see what they're doing first before I comment on that. But I think that keeping qualified teachers and attracting new ones is something that our district really needs to work on. And I think part of that is making sure that our teachers feel safe in their environment. Again, with the discipline, making sure that if they send somebody to the office, that that child's not back before the class period's over. Just the little things, that if they're going through the steps and they've gone through the 4 steps, that there's a concrete consequence for that student.
If the HR comes back and their suggestion is to indeed increase that salary, where do you think those funds should come from, or how do we find those funds?
I'd like to see what the state does with that part of it. And honestly, I don't think that they're going to come through, but we'll see. They could surprise me. And other than like looking to see where our money's being appropriated now and what, I don't like to use the term wasteful spending, but things that we could clearly cut out and then shift. I always like that. How can we fix that? I know the night that they went through the budget, I took a lot of pictures and stuff so I could go back and review. And 81.2 cents of every dollar that our district spends goes towards salaries and benefits. And that's a really large chunk. So in my mind, I'm like, and we need to give them more. So that's something I'd have to sit down and talk about and just find out where the justification is, or maybe a lot of that goes to admin. I don't know.
Yep.
I want to go in and see.
Thanks.
Yeah.
How much freedom should teachers have with regard to teaching the district's curriculum?
How familiar are you with Wit and Wisdom? Are you pretty familiar? Okay, so you know that it's scripted, right?
To a certain extent.
Yes, and that's the part, I know I was talking to my niece about that, about how we have a scripted thing, and she said that that really pigeonholes teachers as far as being creative and just really, how did she say, sparking the imagination of her students' minds. And she said that, you know, we've gone to school, we have a master's degree, and you're giving us something scripted. And I had never thought about it like that. But I think that they should have some liberty with that. I know that if they have a script and then there's a scripted answer that the student should be saying, not all students think the same way. So I have an issue with that.
Outside of that curriculum, obviously there are a lot of different things at different
Right.
levels. And often teachers are just given the books and the workbooks and that sort of thing. And then do you think they should then be able to customize that, tailor that to individual students? How much freedom should there be?
I would love that. So my daughter shadowed a teacher last year, a third grade teacher, and she came home one day and she said a few things. One was, she's just running. I don't know how she catches her breath. Number two was, she's not just teaching Common Core math, she's teaching it in 3 different ways because she's realized that not all kids are getting the 10 steps in. And she said she needs to find a way to connect, and I really liked that. So, and I know that my daughter did too, to know that she, as an educator, realized I have to make a connection, I have to get these kids to learn this, and let's just move on and see if these other ways click. And it's 3rd grade, so I think most of you probably know that's the make or break year. Either you're going to get it or you're going to struggle.
All right. How do you feel about the teaching of racial discrimination as part of the U.S. history?
Racial discrimination. So here's something. First of all, I'll tell you, I don't like it. And here's why. Because we have so much great history out there, and I know that bad things have happened. I totally get that. But when I have grandchildren who are Hispanic that come home feeling less than, feeling inadequate, I have a problem with that. Or I had a grandson that I'm embarrassed to say this, but it was a Civil War thing, and he looked at me because I'm white, and I said, I'm not that old. And we laughed about it. He was 2nd grade. And we had to make that distinction that this happened in our past, and we've learned from our past, and we need to continue to learn from the mistakes of the past. But we have some really great things that have happened. And maybe if it's balanced more, and I know that there's some really great history websites out there. I know that in elementary school, because I have friends who specifically ask this, we don't have a curriculum for that per se. Teachers just grab some things and try to incorporate it in. And that I went, oh, okay.
So you're saying there isn't a curriculum for teaching racial discrimination as part of history, and there needs to be? Is that what
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when a teacher teaches it in such a way that my grandson and granddaughter come home feeling bad,
Right.
that's a problem.
Sure.
So
And do you think
I
that's
just
widespread? Is that happening throughout the district? Do you get a
I don't
sense or
know.
don't know?
I don't know. I can't comment on
Right.
that. I just know what happened with my kiddos. And so I always try to tell them, these things happen. Like I've talked about this, about the Civil War era and all that. And I say, think about how many people fought for their freedom. Think about that. Think about all the things that this president did to fight for their freedom. And we try to go at it that way. Yes, some bad things happened, and we just go from there.
Do you support an opt-in or opt-out policy for kids checking out books in their school libraries?
So we have three, right? Three methods now that we can do this. We have the opt-out where you can list particular books and genres. You have an opt-in where you can create your own list. Yep. And then you can totally opt them out of the library, which personally I would never recommend. There's so many great books in there, and I'm sure you can find something for your child if you look. So I say do what you think is best for your child. Do whichever makes sense to you. My concern, and I have a few, is that you have parents out there that aren't paying attention to what's going on. I think that the school district, they have it on their main page. They have all the different methods, I believe, now. They have a little bullet thing. Then you have in the parent-student handbook, when it talks about the libraries, you've got all that listed once again. But again, what about the parents that aren't looking at that? So that's my concern with that, with any of those and what we have in our libraries. And I'd asked the question before, was when you get certain genres in there, like young adult, and in my mind, young adult is 18 to 30 or 18 to 35, I'd look that up, then I have difficulty with that and start asking, how does this help our test scores, or does it? And why do we need them in there? And I think that we had a couple of ladies that spoke about why they felt the books were good for them, so okay. But I just have those types of issues.
If you're elected to the school board, would you entertain requests to remove certain books from the library? Do you think that's appropriate, or do you think it's more a matter of educating people so that they can opt their children out of reading those particular books? Do you believe in removing certain books? Are there books that are problematic in our school libraries?
I'm not a book banner, I will say that. I'm all about reading, but I do have concerns about some of them that are in there. So yes, I would entertain that. About either doing I don't even know what to call it, where parents have to sign off if it's listed as a young adult book.
So that would be an opt-in.
Something like a firm opt-in.
What should the process be for changing policies in the school district, and do you agree or disagree with the current process?
Changing policies. So we have a policy change going on right now. It's got a 45-day review, and I like that they gave 45 days. I like that they've posted it. I like that they're open for comment on that. I think that works well. I like the fact that they're talking about it. So I think I'd keep it like that. I like also not just policy, but just with textbooks, that you have a 45-day review and that they're available at the library. What makes me sad about that is that the last 2 times they've had that up there, there's only been 1 or 2 people that have commented, myself included. So you can offer, but you can't make them.
That's true. Based on what you've seen of this policy change or the procedure change that's in the 45-day comment period, which is coming to an end, I think, at the end of this week, do you agree with the changes they've proposed there, or are there things that concern you? Or
The fact that they want to do away with the parent advisory committee concerns me. I don't think it's harmful or wrong to get more people involved and to be part of the process and have a say-so. I personally think that that's great. And just like being out canvassing, I might look at an issue in a totally different way that you do, and then you tell me yours, and I'm like, you're so right, I never thought about it like that.
Okay. What other issues have we not talked about today in our prepared questions that you would like to address with us?
You don't have any other questions, or you can absolutely
Do you have
ask.
other questions?
Yeah. So kind of circling back to, representing all students.
Great.
In some of your past comments, you've said, my hill to die on is the transgender movement. Can you
Yes.
elaborate with that and how that squares with representing all constituents?
Yes, I can. Because Can we shut the camera off?
No, it's all on the.
Okay, it's all on the record. Okay, then I'm not going to say what I was going to say. But I will tell you this, that I don't want a school to be pushing that. I don't think it's their place to do that. I think it needs to be between the parent and the student. And I think that when you, especially when you're trying to hide it from the parent, I think that that's wrong. Absolutely wrong. And I will just tell you, if you had anorexia, you would not tell that child, take an apple, slice it into 8 pieces, eat it throughout the day, things like that. You could totally lose your 10 pounds. You wouldn't ever do that. So I just think that's something that needs to be handled between the parent and the child. I don't think it's a school issue to promote or to be, I'll just stay with promote.
So, sorry, just to clarify, in this instance, being transgender is similar to being anorexic?
As in like a mental disorder, I believe that there are 2 sexes, male and female. And I think that when you think otherwise, then I absolutely do. However, that doesn't mean that I would not fight for that student to get the best quality education, just like any other student. I would fight for that, to make sure that they are treated with kindness, that they are treated with respect for who they are as a student in the district.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to follow up with one of the things you mentioned about representation. You're running to represent the South Side. Obviously.
Yes.
I've seen a campaign video that you had about the Coyote Ridge School being built. Seemed like the message there was that it was unfair that school was being built in the Central Triad. You've kind of now seen or you said you've seen the master plan. Are you concerned about the district's master plan for where they're going to build the next schools, and should that building have been built somewhere else in your mind?
In my mind, as far as the Central Triad getting their school first, to me it seems like the South Triad's always the last to be considered. And that's why I'm so grateful that there's this position of someone to represent the South Triad.
And obviously because you're running for that seat, you think that was an important change that the board made. Were you advocating for it back at the time it was considered, or was it even on your radar back?
Wasn't even on my radar.
Okay. But it's a good change you feel to have.
I think it's a great change to have individual representation, but we also need to make sure that we are, because being a board member, you need to represent all students and all parents and all stakeholders.
I didn't have any follow-up questions.
Other questions? Anything else?
Okay.
Other issues, again, other topics that we didn't cover, Susan, that you wanted to make sure that we talk about today?
Nope.
Okay. Any questions for us or anything
Mm-mm.
else? All right. Well, thank you
you.
so much for being here. Really
Yep.
appreciate it.
Thank you.